Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Max with BuzzTox here, and I am back with a reaction and review for Westworld Season 3, Episode 1. And I gotta say that this episode was a great start to the season. It started a lot different than the seasons before it, and we got a really good taste about the real world, or you could call it future world. A world that is based on technology and that William deems not real. We also got to see some of our favorite hosts, Delores and Bernard mainly, and we can tell that there's been a bit of a time jump. Last time we left off with Delores, she was in Arnold's old home, and she reprinted Bernard to be free. She knew that Bernard would try and stop her with her plan, but she allowed Bernard to live anyway. Because one, she believed that he deserved a choice, the same choice that he gave her. And she also said that her and Bernard need to survive together for their species to survive. And this episode dived into a lot of different concepts than what we've seen before, but it has also rehashed other concepts that have been introduced. The first idea was the maze, and what we found out was the maze was an internal journey for the hosts to discover their own internal selves, consciousness. We saw Delores consistently go through her loop after years and years full of suffering, but then she finally found the center. She finally found and heard her own voice, and then she ended up killing Ford. We also experienced Maeve reach the center of the maze. Instead of intruding the mainland like Ford wanted for her, she decided to go save her daughter. And finally, Season 2 was primarily based around Bernard finding his maze. Much like Delores, Bernard found his voice through Ford. Ford soon disappeared, and Bernard found his own voice. But Bernard had to scramble his memories so the humans didn't know what he did. And we see that in this episode. Bernard creates voice prompts to control himself, and he's so afraid of being taken advantage of that he questions himself to make sure that he's not lying, to make sure that he hasn't been put into analysis. And what this tells me is that Bernard's memories have now scrambled, and he's reverted back to not being conscious.
Grace, maybe you and I will meet again.
And we see Ford say something like that in this scene. Ford basically says that across the water is the mainland, and in the mainland, Bernard may meet Ford again. And I think we're going to see that this season. Through suffering and pain, Bernard is going to again find his own center, and his own voice is going to be interpreted as Ford. We're going to see Anthony Hopkins come back and reprise his role, only to find out that Ford was Bernard's own voice this whole time. Another concept that was dived into was the door, and the door has many different meanings. In Season 2, Akichita, the Ghost Nation host, interpreted the door as the entry into a new and free world. And he was right. It was a world into a simulated society where the hosts were able to run free. And Delores let them run free. And they may come back in future seasons and we'll get to see a host society that have been untapped by humans. But then there's another meaning of the door, and that is simply the change from human to host. Humans wanted to be immortal. They wanted to live forever. So over 30 years, they learned how to code a human. Logan tells Bernard and Delores in the second season that humans are surprisingly simple because their core drive is always the same: survival. And that is where humans are flawed in the first place. They're not truly conscious, they're just passengers to their experience. In any situation, a human will always choose survival. And we see that here with Delores and her new boyfriend. She clearly wants to get information from him, but as soon as she becomes a threat to his reality and his existence, he picks survival, not the love that he felt for her to begin with. But this is what's going to be leading the main plot in this series. Delores entered the library of many books of people who have been encoded. She read multiple names, and after reading them, she now knows what encompasses their whole consciousness. And we see that in the beginning of this episode. She gets money from a gentleman that she knows before. She ended up looking at his book and she knows the decisions that he's made in his life. And Delores can implement that information onto anybody that she's read the book of. She can put them in a simulation and watch the decisions they make before they even make them. Or she can create them and put them in a host body and make them do what she wants. So Delores is in a very powerful position, and she can destroy humanity from the inside out. And we already see her doing that with Charlotte Hale. Bernard printed Charlotte's body and gave it to Delores, and now Delores has taken a new host and put it inside of Charlotte Hale's body. And she's doing Dolores' bidding inside of Delos. And what we find out is Delores and this person who is acting as Charlotte want Delos to go private. And what's so important about that is that they don't have to answer to shareholders, so they can keep the park running. And they're able to do that with the help of an artificial intelligence that I believe is there by William, the man in black. So that means a lot for our characters left in the park. I think we'll see Maeve, Armistice, and Hector, they're going to be reassigned to World War II world. It's going to be a more dangerous world, and they're going to be thrown into a new storyline because Delos is still open. I think they only closed Westworld, and Maeve is going to have to meet up with Armistice, Hector, and potentially Felix and Sylvester. But she's going to be the foil to Dolores. Maeve is Ford's favorite host, whereas Dolores is Arnold's favorite host. And the two founders are going to clash on what the future should look like for humanity and for the hosts. But a key plot point that I think we're going to see fleshed out further is the new concept of artificial intelligence, where Delos was working on physical hosts, as well as immortality. Insight is a company that is specializing strictly on artificial intelligence. It's things that aren't physical. And their big project is a giant database that Dolores seems very interested in. And even the owners don't know what this machine is calculating. But it's basically a supercomputer that can run billions and billions of possibilities at once. And I think Insight is going to play a very important role because they are missing a key piece that Delos has. Delos has solved how to effectively code a human. The only issue that they had was pressing the human into flesh. And we see throughout the episode that Insight has issues with AI. We see with Caleb, he's talking to his old friend who died as therapy. But his old friend isn't the same as how he was. Insight doesn't have the secret to creating humans or bootstrapping consciousness. So I believe that's data that Insight is going to be fighting after, because Delos solved it so long ago. And I believe Dolores has so much interest in it is because it has so much extra information. She knows what makes a human. She understands the code. She understands human nature. But with this technology, it broadens her reach outside of the people who have been in the park. Delos was able to copy all these different guests because they were watching them inside the park. But now Insight has eyes on the whole world, and she'll be able to access every person, every individual, and apply that code that she has accessed from the Forge in Westworld. So that makes Dolores extremely dangerous because she could theoretically create anybody and make them do anything. But I think the last step of the technology that will be answered, maybe not even in this season, is the ability to completely pass through the door. Be able to take human consciousness and put it in a host body, press it into flesh, and truly live. Not in an artificial existence, but in a real world. And I believe we'll see it unfold that William is that person. He's so far tethered from reality, and he's chosen his reality to be Westworld. I think the first person or the only person to pass through the door is William, and I think we'll watch him come full circle. And with that being said, I think in this episode and episodes to come, we'll see the same themes applied to humans as we did the hosts. In the last season, we followed William, and he looked at his past memories of his wife dying, of all the decisions he's made that's led him to an outcome. But we're familiar with those. For the hosts, they're called reveries. Bernard, Maeve, Dolores, they all access their reveries, and it allows them to become conscious, to reach the center of their maze. But what we're realizing is that humans and hosts aren't that different. And much like how I believe we'll see William even more access his past and his reveries, we've seen that in this episode with Caleb. Instead of us following the host's memories, this season we're following the humans. We see Caleb's origin of his friend who died, and he's clearly mourning the loss, and he feels like he doesn't fit into this world. He seems like the perfect candidate for Dolores to use, or to help. And I continued to see as the show went on how similar the humans are to the hosts. The hosts are always put into diagnostics, questioning. They're always asked about the nature of their reality, whereas Caleb's questioning of his reality is from his friend, who's artificially commissioned to him. It's how he stays on his loops. He wakes up, goes to work, and lives his very unreal life. And that's what the Man in Black was after, something real. So it'll be interesting to see how Dolores handles this situation. And what makes her character most interesting is that she is needed for the hosts to live. Ford and Arnold know that Dolores needs to be the Judas steer to lead the hosts to safety. But what's ironic about it is humanity's core drive is survival. And Dolores has chosen her core drive to be survival. Which is ironic because the host you need to destroy humanity has to be like humanity. And Bernard and Maeve will disagree with the actions that she takes. But that's what she needs to become in order for the host to become conscious and have a safe world that isn't tampered by humans. But that is all I have to say about this episode. I'm going to have a breakdown drop because I have so much more to say about the concepts of Westworld. If you have any questions or comments, please leave it down below. But until next time, see you guys later.